I had an abortion when I was in London, and why has this common experience not been spoken about?
Throughout her life, Gloria Steinem advocated for women to speak up. But for decades, she kept quiet about her own traumatic experiences. She received terrible proposals from powerful individuals in journalism in the 1960s. One attempted to push himself on her and pinned her down. To get away, she had to bite him. Others offered her private meetings in exchange for jobs. Some of them were later identified as predators, but she never gave them names. She finally reveals at the age of 91 why she kept quiet for so long. You will be shocked to learn the reality about what she went through. On March 25, 1934, Gloria Steinem was born in Toledo, Ohio. She was born in a little trailer attached to her father's Dodge, not in a peaceful hospital. Her childhood was equally unsettled, and her father, who sold antiques for a career, was often on the go. Her mother, Ruth, a reputable newspaper reporter, suffered a horrible mental collapse just weeks after she was born. She thought the radio was speaking to her personally as she began to see objects and hear voices. Gloria attended 12 different schools by the time she was 10 years old. She lived out of a car much of the time, finishing her schoolwork in between lengthy road trips and flea markets, and her father seldom stayed somewhere for very long. Gloria's father finally abandoned them in January 1944, when she was just 9 years old. Near Battle Creek, Michigan, a snowstorm was in full force. After winning $500 at a poker game, he left and never returned. Back in Toledo, Gloria and her mother were left to fend for themselves in a chilly home. The city had previously declared it hazardous and the furnace was broken. Ruth was sent 3 times to mental hospitals between 1944 and 1946. Gloria was left a child as a result, to handle everything. She tries to go to school, frequently arriving late while also buying groceries, paying bills, and taking care of her mother. She learned a valuable lesson from those years. Money and reliance can ensnare women in ways that are taboo. In order to save her mother from having to message her father to beg, she recalled pinching little coins from milk bottles. Nothing felt stable, even for Gloria as a teenager. Her mother was still unwell, the house was in disrepair, and they were barely making ends meet. When she was 16 years old in 1950, their dilapidated house was purchased by the nearby church. A tiny window opened as a result. Gloria was now able to complete her high school education and reside with her older sister in Washington, D.C. She first attended Toledo's Waite High before transferring to Washington, D.C.'s Western High School, where she worked as a cashier and a babysitter to pay for food and bus travel. Despite everything, she graduated in June 1952 and made the honor roll. To save her mother from being confused and alarmed, she used to conceal her report card. She was already learning how to get by in silence and keep going. She received a full scholarship to one of the best women's colleges, Smith College, that autumn. Gloria was one of just 43 students majoring in government. To spoof those hearings, Gloria assisted in setting up a fake trial on campus in 1953, just as Senator Joseph McCarthy was using live television to accuse people of being communists. As a joke on McCarthy's baseless charges, she and her classmates held up blank cards. Newspapers reported on the 700-person turnout. Gloria ignored several teachers' warnings that it would harm her prospects of finding employment in the future. Fear should be ridiculed, not obeyed, she remarked. She graduated with honors in 1956 while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. Before leaving for a research trip to India in 1957, something occurred that altered everything. Gloria became pregnant. In both the U.S. and the U.K., abortion was prohibited. However, a physician named John Sharp in London consented to assist her. All he required was that she swear to live her life as she really wants to and keep his name a secret. It was a major risk. He might have been imprisoned for 5 years if discovered. Gloria never forgot his generosity. She claimed that she might never have pursued her career as a writer or activist if he hadn't assisted her. It wasn't until 1971 that she discussed it in public, but she pushed for women's rights in part because of that incident. The years 1957 and 1959 saw Gloria travel throughout India. She was studying the social roles of village women. She slept in rudimentary ashrams, survived on 4 rupees a day, and traveled hundreds of kilometers with members of the land gift movement. She encountered lower caste ladies who toiled diligently all day for meager handfuls of rice, yet continued to provide land to others without it. This experience influenced her views on women, power, and class. In her notes, she stated that rural wells where women collected water were the source of true transformation rather than large government structures. She claimed to have witnessed the origins of intersectionality in those villages years before the term was coined. She went back to the United States. Smith gave her a $2,400 coveted Harvard scholarship in early 1956 after she graduated with honors, but her mother's condition had gotten worse once more. Gloria decided against attending Harvard. Rather, she relocated to New York City and made monthly trips to Toledo to assist with paperwork and hospital bills for her mother. She started pitching articles as well. She earned $100 for her first paid article, which was on upscale kitchen appliances, barely enough to repair her mother's roof. She later claimed that this decision taught her the true meaning of feminism. It was about more than just politics. It was also about family. Gloria had virtually little when she came in Manhattan in October 1957. She had hardly any money, a notebook full of ideas, and lengthy bus journey receipts. She earned 80 cents an hour waiting tables at a diner, and her tips hardly ever exceeded $5 per night. Every dollar counted in her $12 per week room at the International House. Her first published article discussed how different women pay varying fees for birth control. It was a start, even though it only paid $50. She frequently cited balancing trays and rejection slips as the source of her real education. Then, between 1958 and 1960, she went back to India on another study fellowship. This time, she interviewed impoverished women all around the nation, slept at train stations, and covered more than 11,000 kilometers. She observed Dalit ladies lifting heavy bricks for just 25 pies. She observed 2 council seats set aside for women in a Tamil Nadu hamlet. Something that has never been done before. Under a false identity, she composed reports and sent them to newspapers. And gradually, those tales started to open people's eyes. However, her past would cause controversy in the early 1960s. Gloria assisted in organizing a youth organization that took students to anti-Soviet festivals between 1960 and 1962. It was later discovered that the group had received covert CIA support. A magazine discovered the entire plan in 1967. Gloria acknowledged that she was aware of the funding source, but she also praised the agency for its generosity and integrity. People were astonished by the news. How could something like that be associated with a future feminist icon? However, it also demonstrated that Gloria had always worked in complex, powerful environments. She ultimately got a huge break in September 1962. Published her article, The Moral Disarmament of Betty Coed. It revealed that the majority of women were afraid their employment would jeopardize their marital prospects. Gloria provided hard facts and surveys to support her claims, even showing how the usage of birth control was rapidly increasing. A few readers were upset. A pink rosary and a threat were sent in one anonymous mail, but the piece struck home and revealed her identity. She took an even more daring step in 1963. Gloria, dressed as a Playboy bunny, went undercover. She worked under a false identity in the New York Playboy Club for 17 days. Her hourly wage was only $1. She worked 54 hours a week for a meager $18 after costume expenses. The regulations were stringent. She was examined prior to every shift. She needed to do the bunny dip perfectly while wearing a corset. As long as they tipped, customers were permitted to touch. Gloria made a startling 2-part exposé out of the event after taking notes and hiding them in her sleeves. Her career suffered as a result of the piece, which also created a media frenzy and brought about significant changes within the club. She was viewed by many editors as merely a lovely face who dressed up for tales. Gloria Steinem entered a New York City church basement in March 1969 with only a notebook. Instead of attending the little party, she came to report on it. However, she would never be the same after hearing what she did that day. 12 women took to their feet one by one and told horrifying, agonizing tales of their illegal abortions. A few had been led to unfamiliar apartments while wearing blindfolds. After giving a man in Brooklyn $1,500, one woman bled for days. These women were demonstrating against the state's decision to enact abortion laws without consulting any of them. As Gloria listened while seated in the back, something inside of her changed. Later, she referred to it as her big click. She took the stage at the age of 35 and related her personal experience of having an abortion back in London in 1957. She spoke it aloud that day, after keeping it a secret for years. She was no longer merely a reporter after that. She turned into an activist. She then claimed that it felt as though she had torched the bridge behind her and crossed a border. Her stirring essay, After Black Power, Women's Liberation, was published by New York Magazine on April 7, 1969, just 4 weeks later. She made a direct comparison between racism and sexism in it. She brought up the fact that only 2% of managers were female and that women only receive 59 cents for every dollar earned by men. The magazine's phones kept ringing. Numerous women contacted to inquire about joining the initiative. Her remarks had already gone viral, but some sponsors were so incensed that they threatened to remove their advertisements. By June, 42 college newspapers had reprinted the item. For the first time, Steinem's voice was being heard. No one could ignore her any longer. Some adored her, while others made fun of her. She contributed to the beginning of something tangible and useful on July 17, 1971. With a meager $20,000 grant, she and 2 other women established the Women's Action Alliance in Manhattan. They had a small office. There was only one room, yet women from all over the nation began to write. They sought assistance in combating discrimination at work. They required tools to raise children in ways that did not perpetuate traditional gender norms. From 1971 to 1978, Steinem served as the board's leader, ensuring that the group's focus was on action rather than just rhetoric. They had distributed 50,000 copies of their Guide to Childhood Development by 1975. Schools were able to cease utilizing books that primarily featured women cleaning and cooking because to it. In January 1973, they also established the first battered women's hotline in the United States. Initially, a borrowed phone switchboard was used to answer the calls. Despite having little, they persisted. Steinem spoke at 38 rallies from September 1969 to August 1970. She never stopped traveling. She spoke once every 10 days on average, appearing at Capitol buildings, municipal parks, and college campuses. In November 1969, she displayed job postings from that same morning at a demonstration in Central Park. According to one, a man may make up to $160 each week. According to another, a woman would only be paid $90 for the same work. The audience let out a gasp. She grinned and remarked that she only made up revolutions when hecklers advised her to go home and cook. The media gradually started to shift their tone. She was described as convincing rather than angry by a BBC reporter. People began to view feminists differently. Then something unexpected happened. A special preview edition of Ms. Magazine was released on December 20, 1971. It was intended as a one-time New York Magazine insert. However, 300,000 copies were sold in just 8 days. The largely male publishing community was taken aback. According to Steinem, it demonstrated that women's voices had a sizable audience that no one had ever tried to count. Before there was even a single complete issue, over 26,000 people had already turned in checks to subscribe. They were able to refuse advertising who didn't fit their message because of their success. Ms. published its first standalone issue in January 1972. It was audacious, furious, and unrepentant. Stories concerning lesbian motherhood, poverty, and eliminating sexist terms like chairman were included. Despite being rejected by retailers in 7 states, it managed to sell 350,000 copies, surpassing Esquire's sales for the month. Steinem ensured that the only people in charge of publishing and editing were women. Women's stories should never again have to wait for a man's approval, she said. 53 well-known women signed a full-page message that was issued in the spring of 1972, just months before the Roe v. Wade case. Despite the fact that abortion was still illegal in many places, they all admitted to have had one. Steinem did it while knowing that it might put her in jail. To encourage other ladies to sign, the publication included a voucher. Over 10,000 people submitted theirs by mail. The Supreme Court eventually legalized abortion on January 22, 1973, as a result of mounting pressure. Something else that caused a stir was displayed on the cover of the first edition. With the headline, "Wonder Woman for President," it was Wonder Woman. Steinem had learned that male editors had taken away the comic character's abilities. That was changed in part by that cover. After DC Comics received thousands of letters, Wonder Woman regained her abilities in January 1973. Ms. received more subscriptions than ever before, despite some advertisers believing that comics weren't serious enough for a legitimate magazine. Wonder Woman became a feminist icon because of that cover. Ms. was sold in 22 countries by 1975. It released an 8-page investigation on female genital mutilation that July, custom that impacts around 100 million girls. For the first time, a prominent American magazine dared to refer to it as violence rather than culture. Although several ambassadors were incensed, readers chose it as the year's most significant story. In 1977, a World Health Organization group on the subject was funded in part by reader donations. Ms. declined to broadcast advertisements for diet medicines and tobacco from 1973 to 1976. They also banned sexist advertisements and restricted beauty-related content. The magazine lost almost $2 million as a result. After a Soviet feminist on makeup appeared on the magazine's cover in 1980, Revlon withdrew its advertisements. They hosted benefit concerts and increased subscription fees to keep the journal afloat. They would never allow advertising money to dictate what they could or could not say, according to Steinem. Steinem assisted in the formation of the National Women's Political Caucus in July 1971. She assembled 324 women from 27 states, including Betty Friedan, Shirley Chisholm, and Bella Abzug. In 1972, they drafted a strategy calling for 50% of all political delegates to be female, and they succeeded. The percentage of women who attended the Democratic Convention increased from 13% in 1968 to 40% in 1972. By 1980, more than 220 women who had received caucus training had been elected public office. Steinem assisted in setting up the National Women's Conference in Houston in November 1977. 2,000 delegates from every state attended the 4-day event. After debating 26 topics, they drafted a 20,000-word plan advocating for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. 15,000 demonstrators, organized by Phyllis Schlafly, gathered outside the event to denounce them. Compared to most legislatures, Steinem claimed that the women inside were more representational. The meeting was broadcast live on C-SPAN and had a budget of $5 million. It became the Women's Policy Manual for the Carter administration. Steinem's book, Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions, was published in October 1983. In the first month, 100,000 copies were sold. Her clandestine employment as a Playboy bunny was detailed in one piece, which also exposed the low pay and intrusive medical examinations. Another likened Nazi regulations about women to current prohibitions on abortion. The critics were incensed. The book was banned by certain libraries, and the magazine received a flurry of irate calls. However, the book became a bestseller and introduced a new generation to her ideas. She joined the Women's Camp for a Peaceful Future in 1986, which was located close to a missile facility in New York. 12,000 women from 12 nations set up camp there for 6 weeks to protest nuclear weapons. In his introductory remarks, Steinem referred to nuclear weapons as the pinnacle of male aggression. 2 Danish lawmakers were among the more than 650 women who were taken into custody. At international meetings, their efforts compelled the U.S. government to respond to challenging questions. Future accords were made possible in part by the protests. Steinem became a crucial congressional testimony regarding pornography in that same decade. She explained at a Senate hearing in November 1983 how porn contributed to actual violence. Her remarks shaped a 1986 measure that failed to pass and had an impact on the 1984 Meese report. Nevertheless, her work altered the way legislators discussed sexual exploitation. Additionally, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama in 2013. She had taken action out of fury, he added. All of her accomplishments, including those that weren't always in the news, were recognized by that award. Gloria Steinem's famous quote, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle," has been around for a while. People were surprised when she married at age 66 because of this. She wed David Bale, a businessman from South Africa who was also Christian Bale's father, on September 3, 2000. The event was held in Oklahoma at Cherokee Chief Wilma Mankiller's house. They decided to name each other partners rather than husband and wife. They lived apart in Los Angeles and New York and kept their money separate. Gloria's last name remained the same. David Bale died of brain lymphoma on December 30, 2003, just over 3 years later. Their marriage was later described by Gloria as the happiest political act of my life. Many were shocked to learn that she was married, but it confirmed her lifelong belief that age does not define a person, but the decisions you make. Gloria revealed something in 2015 that she had kept hidden for more than 8 decades. She disclosed in her memoir, My Life on the Road, that she had experienced sexual assault at the age of 9 at the hands of individuals who were ostensibly family members. She and her father, an antique merchant, lived on the road at the time. She claimed that the encounter opened her eyes to the potential for covert and quiet aggression. She had fought for women's safety for decades, but before then, she had never openly discussed her personal suffering. She said that this was the reason she slept with lights on even as an adult, since she was most scared of the dark. People were able to comprehend from her statements that the battles she waged were more than merely political. They were quite intimate. And even while it was painful to recall, the experiences she had as a youngster gave her the willpower to demand change. Gloria started a low-key relationship in the 1980s that lasted for 10 years. Franklin A. Thomas, the first black man to oversee the Ford Foundation, captured her heart. They maintained their own residences, his in Brooklyn and her in Manhattan, and met while working on civil rights initiatives. They didn't get married. She also dated Mike Nichols, a director, and Olympian Rayford Johnson. Her connection with media tycoon Mort Zuckerman came to light later in the 1990s after she described it as a period of gold-plated loneliness. Gloria continued to travel despite everything. Dang! She worked for the causes she supported while traveling for the most of the year. Franklin even got a moniker from her kids, Shine, and came to terms with her role in their father's life. Gloria's life demonstrated that love didn't have to adhere to traditional norms during a time when many people expected women to settle down. Her partnership served as evidence that being close doesn't necessarily entail sacrificing your independence. Gloria discovered a lump in her breast in 1986 when she was 52 years old. It was discovered to be cancer. She decided to undergo radiation therapy for 6 weeks after having a lumpectomy, which at the time was still a novel form of treatment. She talked candidly about the pain, fatigue, and the thinning of her hair. She wanted people to understand that even leaders get sick and that it's acceptable to discuss it, even if most activists were perceived as tough and courageous. She started giving talks at medical conferences and supported legislation that increased the number of free cancer tests available to low-income women. In 1990, it was made a law. Additionally, she ensured that Ms. Magazine featured authentic accounts from women who had undergone treatment. Gloria continued despite her condition. It was incorporated into her message. She later claimed that her experience with cancer made her more aware of the importance of looking for herself. She claimed the lesson preserved her health and her will to fight. Gloria published a book titled Revolution from Within in 1992. It has over 600 pages. Additionally, the first 150,000 copies sold out in a single day when it arrived in stores in January. For 9 weeks, it remained at the top of the New York Times bestseller list. More than 1 million copies had been sold before the year's end. Gloria made the case in the book that political change would not endure unless women felt worthy of it on an internal level. The book was ridiculed by some. It was acclaimed by others. While some universities considered it as feminist theory, others included it in their reading lists for psychology. Publishers noticed its success and began searching for similar books that discussed politics and healing together, despite the fact that critics disagreed. Gloria didn't only sell her book, it altered people's perceptions of self-worth and feminism. A 1993 HBO television film was based on Gloria's well-known Playboy expose. Based on her 1963 covert work as a Playboy bunny, it was titled A Bunny's Tale. When it premiered on February 29th, the movie, which starred Kirstie Alley, attracted over 3 million people. Gloria's actual notes were incorporated in the script, and the bunny outfits were faithfully reenacted from the 1960s. Playboy reported a 12% increase in club membership cancellations following its airing. More significantly, the movie was utilized as proof in a lawsuit involving workplace sexual harassment by a government agency. The film awakened the eyes of young people who had not read the old essay. It was even broadcast on HBO every Easter weekend. It not only kept the story going, but also made people chuckle. Gloria demonstrated that the struggle for change may involve even entertainment. Gloria eventually opened up about something that had been discussed in whispers for decades in 2015. She had served as the head of an organization known as the Independent Research Service in the late 1950s. As it came out, the CIA had provided funding to the group. The CIA funded student travel between 1958 and 1962 in an effort to counter Soviet influence. Gloria claimed that the agency never instructed her on what to write or say, merely covering her trip expenses. In her autobiography, My Life on the Road, she discussed this and even cited former CIA memos that described her as effective because she could win people over without using a weapon. The anecdote became viral on the internet when the book was released. There was debate over whether she had been duped or if she had benefited from the system. Sales of her book skyrocketed, and she was now viewed as a global campaigner rather than just a local one. Despite the complexity of the truth, she didn't avoid it. Gloria, Jane Fonda, and Robin Morgan launched the Women's Media Center in New York on October 17, 2005. Making women more powerful and visible in the media was their obvious objective. Beginning with $3 million in funding, they developed a database called SheSource that included a roster of knowledgeable women who might be news presenters. Only 22 paterns, which garnered 22% of front-page news, were authored by women, according to their first extensive analysis. That percentage increased to 38% by 2015. Gloria also advocated for initiatives that forced networks to provide apologies for sexist content. CNN had to apologize on live television 5 times between 2010 and 2014. Additionally, the Women's Media Center started a global project about sexual abuse in war zones and taught more than 12,000 women to speak out. Gloria saw this organization as a means of transforming activism into lasting outcomes. Filmmaker Julie Taymor began filming The Glorias in 2018, a film based on Steinem's life. Gloria consented to assist, but only with factual corrections, not the artistic ones. She provided input on 147 minor elements over the course of 2 years, ranging from actual campaign buttons to bus seat colors. Just hours before Kobe Bryant's untimely death was announced, on January 26, 2020, the film made its Sundance Film Festival debut. Nevertheless, it received a 77% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and was viewed by people in more than 200 nations via Amazon. Alicia Vikander's recreation of the 1970 Women's Strike for Equality March, complete with 300 extras to match the actual crowd size, was Gloria's favorite. In its first month online, the movie reached over 1.8 million households. Despite the fact that COVID wrecked the theatrical release, it allowed young people all over the world to hear her tale and realize how far she had come. Gloria, who is now 91, delivered the concluding remarks at the Jubilee Conference in New York on April 12, 2025. She spoke to more than 1,200 people, including young activists, writers, and chefs. Climate justice must now be a part of feminism, which she described as the longest revolution. Despite accounting for 80% of climate refugees, women only occupy 15% of key positions in environmental decision-making, she noted. Dance more, she said at one point. The most subversive act is joy. The crowd as a whole cheered. Following her speech, Padma Lakshmi presented her with a unique chronology that detailed all of the accomplishments since the founding of Miss Magazine in 1972. History is not a straight line, Gloria added, holding it up. We climbed the spiral together. Over 600,000 people viewed her live-streamed address in just 2 days. People of all ages are still moved by her message. Gloria used her Instagram and former accounts as instruments for advocacy after Roe v. Wade was overturned on June 24, 2022. Her voice reached millions, despite the fact that she spends much of her time at home in Manhattan. In just 3 days following the decision, her pinned video received 4.6 million views. She outlined the next steps that people may take, including supporting abortion funding, advocating for state legislation, and requesting court reforms. To get around censorship, she provided helpline numbers concealed beneath emojis. She posted a thread in May 2024 demonstrating a 14% increase in pregnancy-related mortality in states where abortion was illegal. Furthermore, this is deadly. It is not hypothetical. She now has 2.1 million followers on the internet, which is more than Miss Magazine ever had. She continues to advance the campaign by converting likes and shares into tangible action without ever leaving her house. During a tearful interview in April 2025, Gloria revealed something that still bothers her. Despite being a budding journalist in the 1960s, she kept quiet about the sexual harassment she experienced. She described how she had to bite his cheek to get away from a famous writer who had trapped her and attempted to kiss her. Because she was afraid it would ruin her career, she kept quiet at the time. Her admission that well-known newsmen offered her jobs in exchange for private encounters was even more agonizing. She said that they were later made public in the 1990s, but she never gave their names. She demonstrated that even strong women may experience fear and silence by sharing the tale now. However, she also demonstrated that speaking up is always possible.